leading energy expert, Narendra Taneja, to tell us exactly why the world turned around the other day. Was it because India abstained in the UN Security Council resolution, and so the oil market said, oh my God, India's abstaining, freak out? No, or all will be well, rather. Nonetheless, Narendra, good morning and welcome. This is a serious moment, obviously. Very uncomfortable scenes and images coming out of the Ukraine. But let's start off with that point. Why did India see it in their interest to abstain in the UN Security Council resolution last week?
Well, you see, there is a difference between supporting, not supporting, abstaining. So India abstained. It doesn't mean that India support. And so there is a huge difference, and it has a history. When you look at the Security Council resolutions and, the kind of game that goes on in the Security Council for the last 40, 50 years, there have been many, Indian territory was invaded by the Chinese just 2 years ago. How many countries from the West really come forward and support India, for that matter, condemn China? None. You see, when India tested nuclear device in the late 90s, Ukraine actually voted against India. Didn't abstain, voted against. So international relations and geopolitics, very little room for emotions.
I mean, we are talking about, let's just be honest here now, without sort of apples for apples comparison. We're talking a whole different scale of event here than what you have just used as examples. We're talking about the full-scale invasion of a country and its capital city surrounded and being bombarded. That is an unprecedented moment, and in terms of comparisons to what you've articulated. So I just want to take you to task on that.
No, you didn't let me complete. So
okay.
You didn't let me complete. Yeah.
Please.
So the point I was trying to make is, in international relations, things, and especially in democratic countries, like you come to India, look at our press, talk to the people, even in politics, huge sympathy for Ukraine, huge across the country. And the government also just abstained. That's all. We have got now, government is struggling to bring roughly 18 to 20,000 students from Ukraine to India. And so, but that, the point here is that when it comes to overall this thing, India, even in the UN, said there should be peace and there should be dialogues resumed as soon as possible. And Indian Prime Minister spoke with the Ukrainian president just day before yesterday, exactly on this issue. And behind the scene, diplomacy is going on. India is actively participating in it. The point I'm trying to make here is that, this, to abstain in the Security Council does not mean that India supports or endorses all these things. It was just that resolution, a limited resolution, and India only abstained. That's it. So otherwise, if you look at, for instance, we are a democratic country. If a democratic country is invaded, of course you are against it. I mean, you don't need to issue a statement on that, go to Security Council. You don't have to do it. But I was just giving you a few points that diplomacy, geopolitics, international relations, they have their own way of working, and emotions very often play a very little role. That's what I'm saying. It has also nothing to do with the fact that India is heavily invested in oil and gas in Russia. India has invested $16 billion. In fact, the biggest Indian investment in a project called Sakhalin-1, which is led by American oil company ExxonMobil. They are the leader, 30% stake, and they are the operator. And we own 20% stake. Have they left? Have they quit Russia? No, they have not. Have they, ExxonMobil, condemned it officially? I don't know. I haven't seen such a statement. So point I'm trying to drive home is that Ukraine, the people of Ukraine, they deserve every sympathy from everybody on the planet. Absolutely no doubt on that. But at the same time, we have to look at everything more holistically. Why, for instance, when Russia was asking that, look, I mean, don't bring NATO so close to our border. I mean, there should have been more kind of, diplomacy on that. And there should have been discussions across the table and so on. So we have to look at things holistically. But my point is that when it comes to the people of Ukraine, I mean, I sympathize with them, and my full, support for the people of Ukraine. Any democracy which is invaded, the way Ukraine has been invaded in the modern civilized world in 2022 is unacceptable.
On that point, ultimately, India is a heavily vulnerable country, depends a lot on the flow of oil. Obviously, the Urals coming out of Russia is a very important source of oil for India. Have you been in any conversations, or your associates, if you like, in terms of Turkey possibly cutting off the Black Sea, the Bosphorus, or how do you see the dynamics? Like we're saying there, Omar, traders might be cut off because of the uncertain legality. How vulnerable is India to the flow of oil that you would need 5 million barrels every day?
Well, our worry is not so much the physical supply of oil, because that will continue, because we source bulk of our oil from the Middle East, the United States, and other geographies. Very little that comes from Russia, less than 2%. And our investment in Russia are well protected. And the Russian investment in India in a big oil refinery, which was taken over by Rosneft only recently, that's also very well protected. From the Russian viewpoint, that's not the issue. Issue is that when you are into this kind of situation, then the oil prices go up, and that's what bothers India, is the price. It's not so much supply, because when anything that goes beyond $70, $72 per barrel, because our budget is based on that, and for that budget of many other importing countries, so then things go for a toss. And that worries fiscal discipline, fiscal deficit to value of rupee, and everything practically, because we are an oil economy. We may not say it every day, but the fact remains we are very much an oil economy. But another point which Omar pointed out, we can't ignore it completely. We saw only yesterday, 40 million people were abandoned as if they were not humans by NATO in Afghanistan. Only yesterday. We have sympathies for the people in Afghanistan. We are supplying them whatever we can. They are also human beings. I have full sympathy for the people of Ukraine. It's because Ukraine is a democratic country. I'm a hardcore Democrat. But let's not forget, the same NATO did what they did in Afghanistan just yesterday. So the point I'm trying to make, people do ask these questions in India and in many other countries for the matter. Emotions are very important. We have our emotions with the people of Afghanistan, the same way emotions for the people of Afghanistan, who were left literally in the hands of the vultures by NATO and the United States, by the so-called best. So let's there's
a lot of layers to that point. There's a lot of layers to that. One does not want to get sucked into all of the layers. What did India do or not do for the people of Afghanistan? What did India do or not do? I heard you built them a building. That was very nice. You built a nice building in Kabul.
Let me complete. No, not building. We not only, if you look at what India did, India did more than the United States in terms of building infrastructure, schools, hospitals, parliament house, stadiums, and help for women there. India did more than any developed country. You just need to buy cold statistics. Don't buy what I'm saying. Look at the cold statistics. We were basically helping the people build infrastructure, helping the people on the ground.
I think
we had thousands of people working on the ground.
Into spaces, as you said, a lot of emotions. Ultimately, what we really want to get a sense of today is the impact of this action, of this development. Obviously, the oil price hovering now solidly 100 up, 100 down. What your thoughts are vis-a-vis, is there impact? Do you expect demand erosion? I mean, there's some view in the market that one could sustain at this level and demand would hold in Asia. But where do you see demand erosion at $100 oil?
Well, you see, the point is that as far as demand for India is concerned, there can't be any destruction, because, we need oil. Without oil, nothing will move. Our target is to go back to 9% growth rate. For that, we are going to consume even more oil, whatever the price. You see, the government will have to cut taxes. In Delhi, for instance, there is already a discussion then how the central government and then the various state government should go about cutting taxes, so that the burden on the ordinary consumer can be reduced to the extent possible. So our worry is, as I said, is not supply. Our worry is mainly the price. And also our second, a very important worry is energy security, long term. If the prices go beyond $100 per barrel and sustain there, that's a very bad news for us. And also it's a bad news for India's efforts for energy transition, because then we'll have to actually invest even more in oil and gas wherever we can. And that will, of course, we are a developing economy, that would come to some extent at the cost of our efforts, on energy transition, renewables, and so on and so forth. So it's very complex for large and complex economies like India, which are heavily dependent on imported oil. Large economy, India is the only country which is so vulnerable. in terms of energy security, because our dependence on other geographies for oil is 85%.
India is much closer to the edge of the vulnerability of food prices increases like this. These indirect consequences of a moment like this, commodities across the board rising. Maybe just speak to that initially, Narendra. I have a follow-up I'd like to ask you.
Well, you see, as I said, that we are not much worried about the food inflation, all that, because we are quite self-sufficient in food. In fact, we export. And except for, the edible oil that we import from Indonesia and Malaysia, where the prices have already started going up, unfortunately. But our main worry, as I said, that, and one of the biggest imports is, of course, oil and natural gas. For natural gas, we depend on imports for roughly 56%, and which is a very important component of, our energy and a total energy mix. So as I said, our biggest worry is oil prices. That's why we're keeping 24/7 touch with Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and with other friends, because as we all know, foreign policy is not run by people who understand energy sector well. It is run by diplomats. Many of them actually have very little knowledge of how the whole energy, things work, including even energy security. Forget about energy transition, and so on and so forth. So that's the biggest worry. What is, unstable Europe is a terribly bad news for India, simply because we are so dependent on each other, and we want the world to focus on Indo-Pacific, the region from India to the western part of the United States, because we think the biggest, most powerful economy in Asia is the biggest threat to Asia. That's how we look at it.
That was my follow-up question to you, because a lot of the sort of analysis on this moment is that perhaps this is a very significant geopolitical shift in the global architecture post-Second World War, one of which, of course, doesn't see India currently on the Security Council permanent membership, for example, which seems somewhat ludicrous given how big and how important India is. What is, you think, the view in India of that point, that indeed this post-Second World War global geopolitical architecture, whether it be IMF, UN, Security Council, and so forth, does need to be reconfigured, and that China and Russia perspective on that is something that India is aligned with?
Well, very good question. You see the gravity center, global economic gravity center, global energy gravity center already moved to our part of the world, but the West is refusing to acknowledge it. They still think the Atlantic is the center of not only the planet but the universe. But there's no truth in it. The fact is it is already moved. So, and Russia is a declining power. So if West gets bogged down in Europe fighting with the declining power, you see, that's a loss situation for us. We want the West to focus on Indo-Pacific, because that's where the gravity center is, and that's where the real challenges, geopolitical challenges are, with China at the center. China is a belligerent power. China wants to see a unipolar Asia first and unipolar world later. But if West gets kind of completely bogged down over Ukraine, in Europe, and fighting with the declining power, Russian economy is much smaller than India, by the way. Do you know that? We are roughly $3 trillion economy. Russia is $1.75 trillion economy. Much smaller than us. When Rosneft was in trouble a few years ago, we bailed them out. We did. ONGC bailed them out. So you see, the point is that, so the gravity center is here, but we see these major shifts, unexpected shifts in the geopolitics. Now the question is that the West got to realize, of course, we need to have a democracy like Ukraine. No doubt on that. No discussion on that. Democracy must be held. For me, Ukraine is a democracy and must be held down. No discussion. But at the same time, you see, West should not get bogged down. Are they fighting for people of Ukraine, or is it a fight to topple one individual called Vladimir Putin? I think it's important to focus on Indo-Pacific, because that's where the challenges are. And by the way, that's where the opportunities are. The world center today, gravity center, is our part of the world. Reality is here. But if they get bogged down there, they'll end up compromising with their own geopolitical interests and facilitating further the rise of a very belligerent China. They'll be helping China, facilitating China. They got to get more real. The threat is here. Challenges are here. Opportunities are also here in our part of the world.